Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Markets at a Grand series. My name is Rufus Kamau, Markets Analyst at FX Pesa. So today we'll be talking about the key highlight events that are currently moving the markets. One of them being the Canadian CPI inflation data that just came out at 3:30 p.m. And of course, we'll also be talking about the current rally in commodities and trying to understand whether this rally will continue or whether it will stop. So we'll be more focused on the sustainability of the rally. So once we cover this, hopefully everyone will be able to trade from an informed perspective. So once you join in, you can just say hi on the live comment section, and this will confirm that everything is working just fine. And of course, remember to like the video and share. So I'll be starting with a disclaimer. So I'm trying to adjust my volume here. So this session is purely educative. It's not a recommendation to trade. It's not investment advice. So you should always do your own due diligence and, of course, practice proper risk management. So having said that, I believe it's time that we start the session right away and take it to the level best. So from what we are seeing or what we are looking at in the economic calendar, it's a day where the Canadian news were dominating, and the data that just came up at 3:30 p.m. Was very important for Canada's central bank, or the Central Bank of Canada. So what we saw was a month-over-month CPI inflation coming in slower. In this case, we saw 0.5% as expected. So the forecast was the same, but the previous reading was 0.6%. So median CPI came in at 2.6%. This was much lower than the forecast of 2.7% and lower than the previous reading of 2.9%. So trimmed CPI, which is the main focus of the Bank of Canada, came in at 2.9% as expected, but significantly lower than the previous reading of 3.2%. So common CPI was 2.6%, down from 2.9% and lower than the expected 2.8%. So core CPI month over month was down to 0.2%, and this was compared to the previous month reading of 0.5%. So this is an overall illustration that Canada's inflation is basically slowing down as expected, and this is increasing pressure on the Bank of Canada to continue dropping the interest rates. So in the previous reading, you will notice that there was a big jump from 2.8% up to 2.9%, and now we have seen the lowest inflation reading of 2.7%, which has not been seen in quite a long period of time. So in the last 5 years, you will notice how inflation moved from around a deflation area of negative 0.4% in May 2020. And then after the COVID printing, we saw inflation accelerating and topping at a high of 8.1%. And since then, it has been continuously dropping until it got to a record low of 2.8% in June last year. So since then, we haven't seen a lower inflation than that. So we have seen inflation rising to 3.3, 4%, 3.8, dropping to 3.1, rising to 3.4, 2.9, 2.8, 2.9, and now the lowest is 2.7%. So the last time we saw inflation dropping to below that was back in March 2021, when it was at 2.2%. So this shows that the Bank of Canada is seeing much progress in the fight against inflation. And now there's a strong likelihood that the Bank of Canada will start considering cutting rates later in the year, which is what is fueling the weak Canadian dollar in the markets. So looking at the markets, we'll be looking at the charts to try and understand how the markets have reacted. So I'll try and share what's on the charts. So on the charts, what we are seeing here, and this is US dollar trading against the Canadian dollar, we had this triangle where the average price movement was more or less sideways but slightly bearish. So earlier in the day, we saw the market breaking this formation. So the breakout was to the upper side. The market pulled back to retest the level and then bounced, but then eventually dropped, especially towards the news announcement. And at around 3:30, we have seen a big jump upwards, and this rally is currently continuing as investors speculate that the Bank of Canada will be considering array rate cuts compared to the Reserve Bank of the US. So as a result, we are seeing the dollar gaining against the Canadian dollar. And of course, the first target at 1.366 has already been hit, and the market is looking to extend that rally. So if the market was to extend the rally further, then we have some levels here that were acting as previous resistance. And now it means that there's a likelihood that the market extends the rally to this point where we had the previous resistance. And this is a price level of around 1.369. So 1.369 seems that like the likely target for USD card traders. So if you look at other Canadian dollar pairs, for instance, card JPY, we should be expecting to see a much bigger momentum. Sorry, added the wrong template. So in this case, we are seeing a market that was trading at a very strong resistance level. So from what we are seeing here, it's a Canadian dollar that was trading at a multi-level resistance area. You'll notice that the rally was facing a very strong resistance here. And immediately after the news that came in at 3:30 p.m., we are seeing the Canadian dollar weakening against the yen and pushing further downwards. So if you zoom out, you'll notice that this was also the same exact resistance around the period of 30th April earlier last month. So in this case, what we are seeing is acceleration downwards, and there's a likelihood we could be seeing the market going for some previous lows. So for short-term accuracy, we could be considering this area here, having seen the market finding resistance here, which was turned into a support here. So it's a likely target for anyone who is going for CAD JPY shorts. So looking at other charts, we also be looking at the performance of currencies for the day. So hello, Harun Kirimi. Hello, Jason. Hello, El Zafan. Thank you guys for joining. I don't know why you're saying good morning. Right now, right here, it's 4:09 p.m. So let's look at more stuff happening in the markets. So right here from the reports, you can see that there is more detailed information on the Trading Economics website. So on the month, it was a 0.5 increase percent. Core inflation on the month was 0.2 versus 0.5%. Trimmed mean year over year 2.9% versus the previous reading of 3.2%, meaning that inflation is moving as expected. And now for the rest of the day, I want you to focus on this area here, where we'll be having out of our Fed members presenting various speeches for the rest of the day. So in this case, we have Fed member Waller presenting a speech at 4 p.m. Then Fed member Williams, Fed member Bostic, and of course, Fed member Barr at 6:45 p.m. So we are seeing 4 different central bankers presenting speech later in the day. And now this could start impacting the US dollar pairs. So the summation of the 4 speeches might have a much bigger impact than the highlights from one individual member. So what traders will be focusing on is the sentiments from the 4 different Fed speakers. So if, for instance, we have, this is 5, I almost forgot there's Fed back in here. So there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with the exemption of Bank of England Governor Bailey's speech. So 5 Fed members. So if, let's say, we get 3 Fed members that are supporting holding rates higher for longer, that could be positive for the dollar. If we get 4, the better. If all of them support higher for longer, then even the better for the dollar. But then if they are considering array rate cuts, then in that case, we should be looking at a much weaker dollar. But then there's a likelihood, having seen inflation remain very tough in the US, there's that likelihood that we could be seeing the dollar continuing to weaken if the Fed members have a majority where they're considering rate cuts. So as we approach trading in the New York session, there's more stuff happening. So on the earnings side, there's quite a number of companies that are reporting earnings today. So one of them is AutoZone, there's Eagle Materials, James Hardie, Lowe's, as well as Macy's. We also have Toll Brothers reporting their earnings before the market open. And then after market close, we'll have Modern Manufacturing, Skyline Champion, Urban Outfitters, and Viasat. So the key highlights for the day will be Lowe's and Macy's. So Lowe's, one of the companies expected to be reporting earnings later in the day. So for Lowe's, you'll notice that the stock is up 4.81% year to date. So it hasn't been performing at all that badly compared to other stocks in the S&P 500. So Lowe's hasn't been very, very profitable. So if you look at the history of quarterly earnings, you'll notice that here on Feb 2023, this was the last quarter of 2022. The company made 958 million profit from a revenue of $22 billion. That profit moved to 2.26 billion, revenue $22 billion. Then revenue increased to 24, almost $25 billion, and net income was 2.67 billion. Then revenue dropped to $20 billion, profit at $1.77 billion. Then in the last reading, there was a big drop in profit to $1.02 billion, and the revenue was also having a big drop down to $18.6 billion. So this case shows a company that has had weakening revenues as well as weakening profits in the past quarters. So in the yearly or the annual performance, you notice that there was a gradual increase before we saw the drop happening in 2023. So in this case, 2023 performance wasn't at all that good with $7.73 billion net income compared to 6.44. So it's a slight increase. But then if you look at the revenue, dropped from $97 billion to $86 billion. So we'll be looking to see whether the company has turned around and has improved on revenue as well as net income. And that could have some increase in volatility in the stock. So for Macy's, it's a similar story, but this one has been making losses. So year to date, the stock is down 6.54%. And if you look at the earnings that the company has been making, you'll notice in this case, it's $509 million from a revenue of $8.5 billion. Revenue drops to $5 billion. Profit remains at $155 million. $5.28 billion of revenue with a loss of $22 million. Then $5 billion worth of revenue with a slight profit of $43 million. And then revenue jumps higher to $8.38 billion, but then profitability is hit. So we see a negative $70 million net income. So in the previous quarter, we saw the company basically making a loss. So from an yearly perspective, 2020 was profitable. 2021, they made a loss. Then 2022, 1.43 billion, 1.18 billion, and in the last year, 1.05 million profit. So it was a very small profit from a very huge revenue of $23 million. So we'll be looking to see if the company has turned around and moved back to profitability. So Macy's and Lowe's are the top highlights to be watching for as at the New York Open session today. So besides that, now we move on to other things. And in this case, we'll be focusing on the commodities rally. So the commodities rally has been pretty strong, and we'll be trying to understand. Sorry guys, I wasn't sharing this. So this is what I was showing. Lowe's company up 4.81%, and quarterly earnings slightly up $1.02 billion, which was down from the previous reading, and revenue was also down. And for Macy's, it's the same thing, but in this case, we had a loss in the quarter. So in the last quarter, it was down 70 million from a revenue of $8 billion. So that being said, we can now jump on and try to understand the commodities and what has been happening with commodities. So Commodities have been the best performing assets of this year, and there is quite a number we should be concerned about. So I know for most of you, your favorite item is gold. So having traded in this wedge, for those who don't know the wedge formation, it's where you have two trend lines that are both facing in the same direction. So you can either have a rising wedge or a falling wedge. In this case, it's a falling wedge. So after gold hitting a new all-time high of 2450, and this was earlier in the week, yesterday, we saw the market dropping to this area, rising again, dropping and rising, forming this wedge. And then a few hours ago, we have seen the price of gold breaking this resistance and moving higher. So after this breakout, notice that price has accelerated higher, pulled back downwards, but there's still more momentum upside, which implies the possibility that this breakout might extend to the top of the pattern, which is 2450, and potentially hit a new all-time high. So there is a good and strong likelihood that gold continues to extend this rally. Also, if you notice, since the opening of the day, price had been going downwards, and we have already recovered all the losses that gold had made in the morning session. So if you are trading, let's say in the Sydney and the Tokyo sessions, gold was moving downwards, but now from the London session, gold has been recovering. And as we enter the New York session, there's a good chance that gold continues pushing higher and hits the previous high and continues to form new all-time highs. So this has been an impressive year for gold, and the bullish momentum is expected to continue. And of course, if you look at the daily candlesticks, you'll notice that this is the third straight day where we are seeing gold prices moving higher. So in this case, we are almost breaking the previous high, which was 24.31. So 24.31 was a major resistance level. So from H1, this is 24.31. So I expect the market to retest this previous price level and continue pushing upwards. So it's the fourth consecutive hour where we are seeing gold prices continuing to print green candlesticks. So as for silver, it has had one of the most impressive performances this year compared to other years, having broken a multi-year high of $30, and now we are seeing an extension of the same. So $30 was a very strong resistance for silver, and somehow it managed to cruise through $30 as if it was nothing. But then after reaching a new high of 32.483, you can see price pulling back downwards to the same level. So price dropped straight towards the same level of 30, made another yet again, in this case from this point all the way up to the same high, and then dropped right back to the same low, but then slightly higher than the previous low. So in this case, now we are seeing silver prices recovering, and this silver squeeze is expected to continue moving higher. So if we are moving sideways, especially considering yesterday's price action, then it is safe to assume that the market is now bouncing from the lower trend line and moving towards the upper trend line. And you can see the last 15 minutes candlestick indicating a rejection of lower prices. So an attempt to go lower was rejected, and now the market is attempting to keep moving higher. So in this case, I expect that the market remains within these two lines, that's 2.483 and 30.949. So in this case, the current swing is towards the upper side, and the expectation is at least the market tests the day's high, which was the same as the yesterday's high of 32.483. So among other commodities is Brent oil. We already saw the this loudspeaker kind of formation, which basically represents a market that is ranging, and the overall price action from this moment seems to be following this direction. And we saw the signal happening here yesterday, where the market found resistance on the upper trend line and kept moving downwards. And now it seems to be finding some form of support along this area. So in this case, we could be seeing the market changing direction, but then it's normally safe to trade at the extreme price levels. So in this case, if you didn't capture the trade yesterday, then it might make sense to be more patient with this market until it hits a new high or low. So in this case, I don't think it's the right time to engage with Brent oil prices, because this momentum could continue potentially. So looking at the past price levels and going to the 4-hour chart, you'll notice that this is not a key level support, and the market has the potential to continue extending the bearish momentum. So Bitcoin, being a digital commodity, made a surprise rally in the morning, hitting $71,976 per Bitcoin. And then, since hitting this high, has been trading sideways. It was having this triangle, made a break, didn't manage to find the momentum, and now it is stuck with the same price level. So in this case, the idea of triangle is now out of play. And now what we have right here is a market that is trading within a range. And currently, as we speak, it's testing the lower side of the same range. So in this case, we could be seeing Bitcoin breaking that level and moving down lower. But also, we could be seeing the market bouncing. So it's a price action area to be very observant, knowing that the market could either break or bounce. So if it bounces, we continue trading higher. But then if there's a break, then we could be seeing price accelerating further downwards and potentially going towards the low of the day around 68,918. So now, as we approach the New York session, it makes more sense to be patient and wait to see how the price action plays out. So for natural gas futures, we have seen a very strong performance. So this month only, the natural gas futures are up, I believe, over 30%. So this is about that 7. So earlier in the day, it was up 43% before making a big dump to around 35% gain. And this is for the month. So it's a very crazy rally. But then we got what I would call a Greek gift after the big sell-off happened here a few moments ago. So we had this big sell-off happening from this high, and the market dropping about 5.52% before finding support around this area. So from market that has had quite a strong rally, and now making that big drop followed by a strong jump, it means that there is a strong likelihood that buyers are looking to capture this bearish momentum and drive the price back to the previous high and potentially to a new high. So be very observant on how the hour closes and try to understand whether this is the bottom for this move and whether the market will be bouncing from this area and making a strong rally towards the previous high and extending this bullish momentum. So high-grade copper futures have had a very good momentum this month again. So right from the beginning of the month, that is the 1st of May, the futures are up 13.33%, with the majority of days being green. The only red days we have had is 4. So we have had basically 4 bad trading days out of, in this case, 14 days. So 10 days rally, 4 days moving back downwards. And none of these bearish moves have had a substantial impact on the trend. So in this case, if you look at the 4-hour chart, it's just a continuation of bullish momentum. And now, looking at the price action that we saw yesterday, the market making a new high, pulling back and still closing at a positive. Then this morning, market attempting to dump and then now recovering. Then it makes more sense to be looking out for the previous high and the potential of the market breaking this high over $5.1948. So there's a strong likelihood that the market eventually cruises above this area and forms yet another high, and we don't have candlesticks on the left, which means that this bullish momentum has the potential to cruise yet again and form new highs. So be on the lookout for this one, especially if it happens to break above $5.1948. So that's it for the day. Those were the commodities in focus today. So thank you very much, guys, for joining. Thank you for your time. So I'm looking at the comment section to see if there is any questions. I can't find any. So remember to like and share the video, and I hope to see you on the next session.